In 1923, Germany, you could order a cup of coffee for 5,000 marks. By the time you finished drinking it, a second cup cost 7,000 marks. Prices were rising so fast that cafes changed their menus while you sat there. A woman left a basket full of cash on the street to run into a shop. When she came back, the basket was gone. The money? Still there, piled on the sidewalk. Because the basket was worth more than billions of marks. Workers got paid twice a day because their morning wages would be worthless by lunchtime. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January cost 200 billion marks by November. Billion, with a B. That was Weimar Germany in 1923. The worst hyperinflation in modern history. Well, second worst. The worst was Zimbabwe in 2008. They printed a $100 trillion bill. 100 trillion. And it couldn't buy you a bus ticket. At the peak, prices were doubling every single day. Literally every 24 hours, everything cost twice as much. And then there's Russia in the 1990s. When the Soviet Union collapsed, people who had saved money their entire lives watched it all disappear in 10 months. Decades of work, gone, overnight. 3 countries, 3 different decades, 3 total collapses of money. And if you think it can't happen here, if you think we're too advanced or too smart or too different, let me show you how it actually unfolds, because the pattern is always the same. And the scary part? We're already further down that path than most people realize. Let's start with Germany because it's the textbook case, the one economists study, the one that still haunts German policymakers to this day. 1914. World War I breaks out. Germany is confident they'll win quickly. So they do what governments always do when they're confident about war. They borrow massive amounts of money and print cash to finance it. They abandon the gold standard, start running the printing presses. The plan was simple. Win the war, make the losers pay for it. Problem solved. Germany's Treasury Secretary literally said in 1915, quote, "It is the Allies who deserve to bear this lead weight of billions. Let them drag it through the decades to come, and not us." Except Germany lost. Now they're stuck with massive war debts. The economy's destroyed, industrial production is shot. And the winners, France and Britain, want revenge. They don't just want Germany to pay, they want Germany crushed. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919 demands reparations. Huge reparations. To be paid in gold or foreign currency, not German marks. And Germany's broke. They don't have gold. They don't have foreign currency. So what do? They print money. More money. Way more money. At first, it's manageable. Prices go up a bit. Nothing terrible. Before the war, $1 bought 4 German marks. By 1920, it's 70 marks to the dollar. Not great, but survivable. Then, in 1922, everything accelerates. Germany misses a reparation payment. France and Belgium get pissed and send troops to occupy the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland. They literally take over the coal mines, steel mills, factories, start seizing goods as payment. The German government responds by telling workers to go on strike. Passive resistance. Don't cooperate with the occupying forces. We'll pay you anyway. And they do. They print money to pay striking workers who aren't producing anything. This is when the death spiral starts. July 1922. Prices rise 50% in 1 month. The government responds by printing more money. August to September, prices rise another 71%. More printing. By November 1922, the exchange rate hits 8,000 marks to the dollar. Then 1923 hits like a bomb. January. Bread costs 250 marks. Expensive, but doable. February. It's 1,200 marks. July, it's 100,000 marks. September, it's 2 million marks. November, it's 200 billion marks for 1 loaf of bread. The government is printing money so fast they can't even put numbers on the bills. They just print blank bills and stamp the denomination later because by the time they finish printing, the number's already too low. People are getting paid twice a day. Morning wages, lunch wages. Because if you wait until the end of the day, your morning money is worthless. Workers would get paid at lunch, sprint to the store, and buy anything they could find. Food, clothes, furniture, anything. Because tomorrow it'll cost 10 times more. Shopkeepers couldn't keep up. They'd buy stock in the morning, and by afternoon the replacement cost was double, so they stopped restocking. Farmers refused to sell crops for worthless paper. They wanted foreign currency or barter. Food riots broke out. People marched into the countryside to loot farms. Pensioners starved. Their life savings, carefully accumulated over decades, couldn't buy a subway ticket. The middle class was wiped out, completely destroyed. People who had been comfortable, who had saved responsibly, who had done everything right, lost everything. And here's the thing that nobody talks about enough. The government knew. They knew it was happening. But they kept printing because stopping would mean admitting they couldn't pay the workers, couldn't run the government, couldn't function. So they denied it, made excuses, blamed speculators, blamed foreign currency traders, blamed everyone except themselves and their printing presses. By November 1923, one US dollar was worth 4 trillion marks. Trillion. The currency had become so worthless that people used it as wallpaper. Kids played with stacks of bills like building blocks. It was cheaper to burn money than to buy firewood. Then it ended, almost overnight. November 15th, 1923. The government introduces a new currency, the Rentenmark. Backed not by gold, they didn't have any, but by land and industrial assets. They stopped printing, balanced the budget by firing 700,000 government workers, cut spending. The hyperinflation stopped. Within weeks, prices stabilized. By 1924, the economy was recovering, but the damage was done. An entire generation lost faith in democracy, in government, in the system. Extremist parties on both left and right surged. Street violence became normal. People were desperate, angry, and looking for someone to blame. 10 years later, that anger brought Adolf Hitler to power. The hyperinflation didn't directly cause World War II, but it created the conditions. It destroyed trust. It made people vulnerable to authoritarian promises. It showed them that the institutions they believed in could fail catastrophically. That's the real lesson from Weimar. Hyperinflation doesn't just destroy money, it destroys social cohesion. It breaks the contract between citizens and their government. And what comes after can be worse than the inflation itself. Now let's fast forward 85 years. Zimbabwe, 2008. Robert Mugabe has been running the country since independence in 1980. By 2000, he's been in power 20 years, and he's getting nervous. Opposition is growing. He needs money to bribe allies and crush enemies. The economy's already struggling. So what does he do? He goes to the printing press, just like Weimar, just like every government that runs out of options. But first, he does something that makes everything worse: land reform. He takes farms from white commercial farmers, many of them producing most of Zimbabwe's food and exports, and redistributes them to political allies. Most of these new owners don't know how to farm. Agricultural output collapses. Food production falls off a cliff. Now, Zimbabwe, which used to export food, can't feed itself. They have to import. But they don't have foreign currency to buy food imports, so they print money to buy foreign currency. The currency starts falling. By 2006, inflation hits 1,000% a year. Toilet paper costs 417 Zimbabwean dollars per sheet. Not per roll, per sheet. A single sheet of toilet paper, then it gets worse. 2007. Inflation reaches 66,000%. The government stops publishing official inflation statistics because the numbers are embarrassing. 2008. This is when it goes completely insane. January. A loaf of bread costs a few $100,000 Zimbabwe dollars. July. It's 1.6 billion. September. It's hundreds of billions. November. Prices are doubling every single day. Not every week, not every month, every single day. Wake up, prices doubled while you slept. The official inflation rate in mid-November 2008 was estimated at 79.6 billion% per month. That's 89.7 sextillion% annually. Sextillion, that's a number with 22 zeros. The government printed a $100 trillion bill. Let me say that again, $100 trillion, written on a single banknote. And it couldn't buy a bus ticket. It was worth less than $1 US. Teachers and civil servants were getting paid trillions per month in salary, but that was equivalent to about $1 US per day. Half a bus fare. People were making trillions and starving. ATMs stopped working because they couldn't display numbers that high. The software wasn't designed for prices with that many digits. Stores gave up pricing things in Zimbabwe dollars. They just used US dollars, South African rand, whatever foreign currency they could get. The government tried everything. They printed higher denominations. $1 million bills, $1 billion bills. They declared inflation illegal, literally made it a crime for businesses to raise prices. Guess what happened? Shelves went empty. If you can't raise prices and costs are skyrocketing, you stop selling. They redenominated the currency 3 times. First, they lopped off 3 zeros. $1 million old dollars became 1 new dollar. Then they did it again, then again, each time promising this would fix it. Each time it failed. People stopped using the currency entirely. They switched to barter. Cigarettes became a medium of exchange. Sugar, cooking oil, anything tangible. Foreign currency when you could get it. The Zimbabwe dollar existed in name only. How did people survive? A few ways. If you had family abroad, they sent money. Remittances became the country's largest source of foreign income. Tens of thousands of nurses, doctors, teachers, accountants left the country. Brain drain. They sent money home to keep their families alive. If you didn't have family abroad, you got creative. Cross-border trading, hustling, doing whatever it took. Unemployment hit 80%. 8 out of 10 people had no formal job. The economy basically stopped functioning. By early 2009, the government gave up. They officially allowed people to use foreign currencies, stopped printing Zimbabwe dollars. The hyperinflation ended immediately. Once people could use stable currency, prices stabilized. But the damage? Catastrophic. An entire generation's savings wiped out. Banks collapsed. Pension funds became worthless. People who had worked their whole lives retired with nothing. And here's the kicker. In 2019, the government tried to introduce a new Zimbabwe dollar. Within a year, it was inflating again. Not as bad as 2008, but bad enough. Because they didn't fix the underlying problem. They just stopped printing for a while, then started again. December 25th, 1991. Mikhail Gorbachev resigns. The Soviet Union ceases to exist. The hammer and sickle comes down from the Kremlin. Boris Yeltsin is now president of Russia. The economy is in shambles. The Soviet system is dead. They need to transition to capitalism fast. Western advisors recommend shock therapy. Free the prices, let the market work. January 2nd, 1992. Price controls lifted. Economists predicted prices would rise 3 to 5 times. That seemed manageable. They were wrong. Over the next 10 months, prices rose by a factor of 30. 30 times. Not 3. 30. People's life savings vanished overnight. And someone who had saved for 40 years, carefully putting away rubles for retirement, woke up one day and their entire life's work could maybe buy a loaf of bread. Maybe. The government had to print money. They had no tax revenue because the economy was collapsing. Factories were closing. No one was paying taxes. So they printed. The money supply increased by a factor of 18 in a single year. By the end of 1992, inflation hit 2,330%. The next year, 875%. The year after, 301%. It kept going until 1995, 5 years of money becoming worthless. The exchange rate tells the story. In 1991, about 100 rubles bought $1 US. By 1998, it took 6,000 rubles. And that's after 3 redenominations where they lopped zeros off. Banks collapsed. Savings accounts wiped out. Pensions became worthless. A third of the population fell below the poverty line. Life expectancy dropped. Social dysfunction exploded. And here's what's important. This wasn't a backward African dictatorship or a defeated World War I power. This was a nuclear superpower, the second strongest economy on Earth just 6 years earlier, a spacefaring nation with world-class scientists and engineers, and it collapsed anyway. People adapted the way people always do. Barter systems sprang up. Enterprises traded goods directly. Workers got paid in products instead of cash. Cigarettes and alcohol became currency. US dollars if you could get them. The new Russian government tried everything. Price controls, currency restrictions, nothing worked. Because the fundamental problem was they were printing money to cover budget deficits, and the economy was shrinking at the same time. More money chasing fewer goods. That's the formula, every time. The hyperinflation finally ended around 1995 when they got some fiscal discipline. But then, in 1998, another crisis. The ruble collapsed again. This time the government defaulted on $40 billion in debt. Banks failed. People lost their savings again. The social cost is hard to overstate. An entire generation became cynical about democracy, about markets, about Western-style reforms. They watched their country go from superpower to economic disaster in less than a decade. That cynicism, that sense of betrayal, that nostalgia for stability even under authoritarianism, it's part of what enabled Vladimir Putin's rise. People were willing to trade freedom for stability because they'd seen what chaos looked like. All right, 3 countries, 3 hyperinflations. Let me show you the pattern. It always starts the same way. Government has big expenses it can't pay for. War, social programs, corruption. Doesn't matter. The bills are bigger than the revenue, so they borrow. When borrowing stops working, they print. At first, it's manageable. Prices go up a bit, people complain, but life goes on. Then something breaks. A shock. War ends badly. A dictator seizes farms. A superpower collapses. Whatever. The economy shrinks while the printing continues. That's when it accelerates. Prices start rising fast. Weekly, then daily, then hourly. The government always denies it. Blames speculators, foreign enemies, greedy businesses, never their own printing press. People panic. They try to get rid of currency as fast as possible. That accelerates it more because the velocity of money spikes. Money changes hands faster, which has the same effect as printing more. Stores stop restocking. Farmers hoard food. The productive economy shuts down. People revert to barter, foreign currency, anything but the national currency. The government tries to fix it without addressing the real problem. Price controls that create shortages. New currency with zeros lopped off. Declarations that inflation is illegal. None of it works. Eventually, either the government collapses or they get serious. Stop printing. Balance the budget. Introduce a new currency backed by something real, or at least credible. The hyperinflation ends quickly once they do. But the damage lasts for decades. Lost savings, lost faith in institutions, lost social cohesion. That's what creates the conditions for authoritarianism, for extremism, for social breakdown. Now, here's the question everyone's thinking. Could it happen here? Could it happen in America or Britain or any developed Western country? The standard answer is no. We're too advanced. We have independent central banks. We're not printing money to pay soldiers like Weimar or to fund a dictator like Zimbabwe or managing a collapse of communism like Russia. But look at the conditions. Massive government debt. The US is $36 trillion in debt. That's 123% of GDP, higher than after World War II. Deficits every year. The government spends way more than it collects in taxes. Every year. Central bank money printing. They call it quantitative easing now instead of running the printing press. But it's the same thing. Creating money to buy government debt. Loss of faith in institutions. Check. Trust in government is at historic lows. Political polarization. Extremism rising on both sides. Check. The ingredients are there. The difference is we're not in a crisis yet. The economy's still growing. Inflation's elevated but not spiraling. But here's what the three examples teach us. It doesn't spiral until it does. And when it does, it happens fast. Weimar went from manageable to catastrophic in less than a year. Zimbabwe went from bad to apocalyptic in months. Russia's savings were wiped out in 10 months. The government always denies it until they can't anymore. They always try easy fixes that don't work. They always blame anyone but themselves. And the people who suffer most are the ones who saved. The responsible ones. The ones who did everything right. They're the ones who get wiped out. Because their savings are in the currency that's dying, so what do? I'm not giving financial advice here, but I can tell you what worked in all three cases. Hard assets. Real things. In Germany, people who owned land or gold or foreign currency survived. People who had cash got destroyed. In Zimbabwe, same thing. Foreign currency, commodities, anything real. In Russia, the people who adapted fastest to dollars and barter did okay. The pattern is clear. When money dies, you need something that isn't money, or at least not that money. Skills matter too. In all three cases, people with valuable skills, tradable skills, things other people needed, they figured out ways to survive. Doctors, mechanics, farmers, anyone who could provide something tangible. Community matters. The people who had networks who could help each other, who didn't try to do it alone, they made it through. And most importantly, the people who saw it coming and moved early did better than the ones who waited. In Germany, the people who bought foreign currency or gold in 1922 when things were bad but not catastrophic, they preserved their wealth. The ones who waited until 1923 when it was obvious, by then it was too late. So let me bring this home. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Soviet Russia. 3 hyperinflations. 3 total collapses of currency. 3 examples of what happens when governments print money to solve problems and the economy can't support it. The pattern is always the same. It starts slow, then it accelerates fast. The government denies it. They try fake solutions. Nothing works until they stop printing and face reality. The people who get destroyed are the savers, the responsible ones, the people who played by the rules. Their life's work vanishes. The people who survive are the ones who saw it coming and moved to hard assets, foreign currency, skills, community. I'm not saying hyperinflation is coming to America or Britain or wherever you live. I genuinely don't know. Maybe the system is stable enough to avoid it. Maybe central banks have learned enough from history to prevent it. But I am saying the ingredients are there. The debt, the deficits, the money creation, the loss of faith in institutions, and I'm saying that when it does happen, it happens fast. And by the time it's obvious to everyone, it's too late to protect yourself. So pay attention to the pattern, watch for the signs, don't assume it can't happen here just because it hasn't happened yet. Because that's what people in Germany thought in 1922. That's what people in Zimbabwe thought in 2006. That's what people in Russia thought in 1991. And they were all wrong. Your turn. Drop a comment. Have you thought about what you'd do if the currency collapsed? Do you think it could happen in a developed country today? What are you doing to protect yourself? Are governments making the same mistakes now? I want real opinions, because this isn't ancient history. This is a pattern that keeps repeating, and understanding it might be the difference between losing everything and making it through. This is education and historical analysis, not financial advice. I'm not telling you to panic, buy gold, or do anything specific with your money. I'm not a financial advisor. This is based on historical events and economic research. Make your own decisions. Consult professionals. Do your own research. Don't panic, but don't ignore the lessons of history either.